My name is Kenny Mackay, and I grew up in this wee village called Rhenigidale.
The desire to make connections has to be one of the most basic of human traits. So much of the language of our everyday life reflects this. We piece together, join the dots, link up, build bridges and forge paths. We simply connect, whether those connections be physical or metaphorical, emotional or practical. Perhaps, though, the most powerful connections are those that are all-encompassing. In fact, the links between us are hard to categorise. A bridge joining two communities may start life as an object of engineering, but with it comes the opportunity for relationships to form and lives to be shared. Clinging to the frayed edges of the ragged shores of the Isle of Harris, a single-track path navigates its way above cliffs and around bays. Trodden over centuries, it wasn't just the easiest path, but the only physical land connection to the village of Rhenigidale.
This was such an isolated community. But the one main benefit of it being isolated, that we all worked together, helped each other, and no one was any better than a neighbour.
This is Kenny, the loyal postman who walked this overland artery between Rhenigidale and Tarbert for 12 years. He was far more than just a man who delivered the mail. Kenny was a lifeline and a staple to the hamlet's survival.
It was our link with the outside world, and if there was medication for anybody or anything like that, you have to be bringing that back.
We came to ride in the footsteps of Kenny, to experience what we simply knew as the Postman's Trail. So fundamental was this path to the community that its name long outlived its essential purpose. What we stumbled across was a trail that was embedded with tales of community, survival and love. For us, it was a newfound connection with the remote beauty of a tiny corner of Scotland. For Rhenigidale, the path symbolises more than that. Kenny walked the exposed track 3 times a week, there and back as part of his commitment to the postal service. 3 times a week he delivered not only the mail, but news of the outside world. In his own small way, he sustained the community, bringing love letters and bank statements, medication and announcements of births, deaths and marriages, and only once in his 12 years did the weather get the better of him.
Once it was a horrendous gale, and I hadn't gone very far when I got blown on my feet, so I turned back home. There was one new postmaster in Stornoway, and he was looking at my timesheets, and the time was taken to deliver the mail. And he said, I think we should give that man a van, spending a lot of time on his roads. And I said, well, if you do that, we'll be quite happy to get a van, but you have to give him a road first. Interesting time sometimes.
Rhenigidale was facing bigger problems in an evolving world. The sea crossing that supplied the community with food and other necessary provisions was a dangerous one. During the frequent winter storms, weeks would go by without the boats being able to land, and sailing placed its crew at enormous risk.
And a big risk to themselves in bad weather too. I'll never forget what they've done for us.
The isolation of the village meant that eventually many people left to make a life elsewhere. Yet those who stayed refused to let it die. Together, they campaigned, championed by the man who was their biggest connection to the outside world, campaigned for the simple right to be joined up to the rest of Harris via a road.
Various bodies realised, well, if they don't get that road finished, they won't be there, and we'll have a road halfway up the hill and no one in the other side of it. So they were persuaded to start the road and finish it in 2 years, and they did that.
The road opened in 1990, and with it ensured the ongoing survival of this cluster of houses in a tiny bay on a tiny island in the Atlantic. A few short miles of tarmac changed the destiny of the people who lived there, allowing them to work further afield, but return each night or weekend. People could visit them for the first time, and no one need fear the worst when they got ill.
Just our survival is just as simple as that. You are putting lives at risk by staying.
So much that we have taken for granted our entire lives was gifted by a single-track road that finished as a dead end at the last house in the village. A new connection had been made, but the old one lives on, repurposed.
Little words have spoken. No need your time. None in the open. And I want you like I never had. With every word that's spoken, I am closer to you. Now I keep the lights on when the walls are closed.
The nature of connections evolve over time, driven by human interest, technology, or other factors. Some becoming stronger, others lose meaning when their reason for existence dies off. The postman's path is no longer walked 3 times a week through necessity. Its traffic is made up almost entirely of people pursuing escape from the crowds and the tarmac. It just so happens that the short few miles between Tarbet and Rhenigidale make for mountain biking perfection. We paused, looking back across the bay to Kenny's house on the seafront. The road not visible from this vantage point. We left behind us a small but thriving community. More than that though, we left with a promise to return and ride the trail again, forging our own deeper connections. It is human nature after all.